Okay. Now, what is the danger of someone who has chronic hypertension? So, and it's true that yeah, certainly increases risk of cardiovascular disease, increases the risk of myocardial infarct. Um, there could be increase of cardiomyopathy, right? Cardiomyopathy is actually a nice word. Right? But why? Why is there increase of risk? Okay, why is there increase of risk? Well, you think of it this way. If the aortic seminal valve right here has diastolic pressure of 80, right? That means the intraventricular pressure only has to generate about 81 to open it. Does that make sense? If inside is 81, you can open it. But now if someone who is 90 now, diastolic pressure is 90, the ventricle, intraventricular pressure 81 is not opening. It can't open because it's below that. So the intraventricular pressure has to be higher to be at least 91 if you want to be open that valve, right? And so cardiac myocyte, in fact, is kind of like skeletal muscle. It can't divide. Smooth muscle can. But if just like you work on your weight, right? If you can increase the resistance over time, your bicep brachii will be bigger, not because of more muscle cell, but because there's conditions, the muscle cells get bigger. We call it hypertrophy. So instead of muscle cell look like this, it's going to look like that. Okay? So there's more actins and myosins in there. This is known as hypertrophy. Now, if you ask the ventricle to contract harder and harder and harder, right, the wall will become thicker and thicker. It's going to hypertrophy, okay? And so the lumen's going to get smaller and smaller. And so now it cannot occupy a lot of volume for the blood. And, over progressively, you can have, essentially, is cardiomyopathy. That could lead to, say, congestive heart failure, if you will. It's not pumping enough blood for the body need. And that's the problem with someone who has chronic hypertension. You ask the ventricle to work harder to open up the aortic seminal valve. Okay, now the heart sound, there's two heart sounds, lub-dub, lub-dub. Of course, the lub is generated by the closure of the AV valve, and the dub is due to the closure of the aortic seminal valve, okay, mainly, but pulmonary seminal valve. And the murmur sound is usually an abnormal valve. So instead of saying lub-dub, you might say lub-dub, lub-dub. That means blood is gushing back into the atria from the ventricle. That's known as a murmur, okay? Now, doing this, remember I told you earlier, isovolumetric contraction, doing this pressurizing stage, the blood is actually, it stays within the ventricle. It's gushing, they're creating turbulence. In fact, when it's pushed against the aortic seminal, the atrioventricular valve, that's where the first heart sound is heard when doing that isovolumetric contraction. And then blood, now when it's pressurized enough, so that blood now leaves the heart, right, into the systolic volume pressure, and then it's relaxed, right? The blood trying to come back in, but it can't. The aortic valve closure, it just snapped back, closed. That snapping of back created the second heart sound called the dub. Okay? The snapback, in the snapback on the aorta and semilunar valve as well. Okay? Now here's an important question, is where do you listen to these valves? Okay? And I would say the best way for you to remember it is to write down this symbol. Right? This is the alpha symbol, but this is the opposite of the alpha symbol. Okay? And just put down 1, 2, 3, 4, and put them in alphabetical order: A, B, P, and T. Right? And think of the sternum is your divider. So the best place to listen to the aortic sternal valve here is the second intercostal. We call it second intercostal. Intercostal means between, right of the sternum. So you see here, second intercostal right of the sternum. If you want to listen to mitral valve or bicuspid valve, it's over here. It will be fifth intercostal. So just between second and fifth. This will be the fifth intercostal, left of the sternum. Fifth intercostal, left of the sternum. And you want to listen to the pulmonary seminal valve, it is the second intercostal, left of the sternum. So you say the sternum's right here. So this is the right of the sternum. This is the left of the sternum. So at the pulmonary seminal valve is the left of the sternum, second intercostal, and the tricuspid valve would be the right of the sternum, fifth intercostal. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay? All right, there you go. That's going to be an exam. Cardiac myocytes work as syncytium. So you have your atrial syncytium, and then you have ventricle syncytium. You don't have atrioventricular syncytium, and that's because of the fiber skeletons of the heart. So microscopically, we already know that the heart skeletal muscle is different from the cardiac muscle because of this. While they both have striation, intercalating disc. You see, at the intercalating disc, you can see there's gap junction. Now this allows the calcium to flow from one cardiac myocyte to the other. Histologically, of course, you can see that cardiac myocyte branch. You see a branch here. It has striation just like skeletal muscle. Okay. Cardiac myocyte contraction. Now, this is one major difference between skeletal muscle and cardiac muscle, and that is what you see. One of the ways that we can increases the strength of the contraction in the skeletal muscle is to this phenomenon known as summation, right? In a summation, what you want to do is you want to increase the frequency of contraction. So you hope it so that when doing the relaxation stage, so contraction, relaxation, contraction, relaxation, contraction, but doing relaxation is usually, again, it'll be higher, right? It'll be higher. This is known as tetanus, okay? And if there's a contraction where there's no relaxation, this is tetanus, that you can see it in skeletal muscle. Now, you don't want this to occur in cardiac muscle, because if this occurs in cardiac muscle, the heart is not, it's just free. It can't pump blood anymore, right? And so for the cardiac, while there is contraction, but it appears that there is a long refractory period before it can relaxations again. This is critical. This absolutely refractory period right here, you cannot cause it to contract because it's not repolarized. It can't repolarize. Okay, and that's the key difference. Okay? You don't see summation in cardiac myocyte. You don't see summation is because after the cardiac myocyte contraction, it turns out that the calcium will enter. In this case, calcium carries a positive charge, right? The membrane remains as positive charge, as if it's depolarized, 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 right? It cannot repolarize until 250 milliseconds later. So that's the key thing. Cardiac myocyte has a long, absolutely refractory period, which makes sense. So it doesn't, you don't want it to go into summation. Okay. All right. And unlike the skeletal muscle, which require the motor neuron to innervate it, right, to release acetylcholine, which open up the sodium channel, causes sodium to enter, causes depolarization. That's skeletal muscle. In cardiac muscle, what happened is that there is a particular place, okay, right here, called the SA node. Okay. Now, the SA node has a leaky sodium channel. So it allows the sodium to come in. Okay. In fact, every time the sodium comes in, the membrane potential started to increase, and then it depolarizes. So you don't need a motor neuron to innervate to open up the channel. The sodium channel is there. It allows the sodium to come in, and it's depolarized. Sodium comes in, depolarized. Sodium comes in. So it does it intrinsically, okay? Intrinsically at 100 times a minute. So undergo spontaneous depolarization 100 times a minute. But our resting heart rate is 75 beats per minute. Every time it's depolarized, it should lead to a contraction, but it doesn't, right? In fact, what happened is that the vagus nerve is controlling this, how much the contraction. So vagus nerve will slow down, decreases the heart rate. Okay? It is very true. So if you cut the vagus nerve, your heart rate will boom, bounce right up 100 beats per minute. So we call it the vagal tone. Vagal tone is to ensure that the heart beats at 75 beats per minute, although intrinsically it's 100 beats a minute. Anywhere along this, right, can undergo spontaneous depolymerization, but it's very slow. It's like 30 beats per minute. That's how slow it can depolymerize. There's another one over here called the AV node. The AV node can undergo spontaneous depolymerization, but at 60 beats per minute. Okay, 60 beats per minute. But if this guy depolymerizes 30 beats per minute, very slow, this guy over here depolarizes 60 beats per minute, and this guy depolymerizes 100 beats per minute, he's the fastest. He's going to set the trend, right? So that if he's fired, everyone has to follow. So the SA node is known as the pacemaker. It sets the pace of the heart. It's the fastest, right? Not the slowest, but the fastest. So oftentimes what happens is that the SA node fire, it will send the signal over to the AV node. This is atriosyncytium. And then the atrial node will send the signal through the, it's in between, like the junctional fiber into the bundle branch and then Purkinje fiber, for example. Okay, let's see a little bit. It's called conductions of the heart, and note the order: SA node to AV node to the junctional fiber, the bundle branch, and Purkinje fiber. Okay, yeah. Okay, the calcium influx, right, in sodium causes the pacemaker, All right, here's another way of looking at this. At the pacemaker potential, okay, what you see here is that this is the membrane potential of the heart. So typically, membrane potential, a lot of neuron is about minus 90 millivolt, and then it's slowly drifting up to minus 75 millivolt, drifting to minus 55 millivolt, and that's when you open up the potassium channel. Okay. Now, at the pacemaker potential, there's a leaky sodium channel. Okay, sodium channel is slowly coming up, enter, right? And as it's reached to minus 40 millivolt, calcium channel open. Okay, calcium channel comes open, it's going to depolarize it, so the membranes start to come forward. You see, and when it comes forward, more calcium comes in. The membrane is now from negative to positive, you see. And then what happened is that the potassium channel started to open. So intracellularly, you see there's a lot of potassium. So potassium started to leave, right? And when potassium started to leave, the membrane potential started to become negative again. Okay, negative, negative, negative. And then slowly sodium channel open. This is a leaky channel, causes depolymerization again. You see that? So this is known as the pacemaker potential. But the leaky sodium channel open, but allows calcium to enter. That's what it means. You see here. So the use of calcium influx rather than sodium for rising phase of the action potential. Okay. Well, it is a leaky sodium channel, but the membrane potential allows us the calcium channel to open, so calcium to enter. All right, so this is the summary. What we're saying in that is once you have an action potential, right, from negative to positive depolarization, then you're trying to get the repolarization again, but you can't because you see this. Oh, actually, what happened here is from here to here is about 200 milliseconds. This is depolarization. This is repolarization. And you can see that it doesn't repolarize immediately because on this side, what you see here is that when it's depolarized, you see how calcium started to come in. Calcium comes in, causes the membrane potential to be very positive to about 150, 200 milliseconds, and then it repolarizes again, right? So sodium open, calcium enter, and only when potassium leave, you get repolarized. But the point here is this, all this thing is telling you is that in cardiac muscle, there is an absolutely refractory period, so that when it depolarized, it cannot repolarize again immediately. If it does, there's a chance of getting summation, right? That leads to tetanus contraction, that we see that in skeletal muscle. Here you do not get tetanus, no summation, because there's a calcium that sustains that positive charge before it can repolarize to make it negative again. All right. So when we look at the conductions of the heart, right, and you need to know this order, right? The SA node fire will lead to atrial syncytium, and atrial syncytium goes to the junctional fibers, junctional fibers goes to the AV node, AV nodes into the AV bundle, AV bundles into the bundle branch, to Purkinje fiber, and then the ventricles start to contract. So another way of showing you is this. The conductions of the heart, the SA node is fine where the superior vena cava meets the right atrium. That's the SA node. And the SA node fire causes the atrial syncytium, okay? And it sends it down to these junctional fiber, right? And then your AV node. So junctional fiber, by the way, sorry, is before the AV node. AV node then goes into the AV bundle, NV bundle into the bundle branch. Okay, this bundle branch, sometimes known as the bundle of His as well. I might use the term bundle of His. The pathologist that's kind of like identify that bundle of His. And then it goes down into the Purkinje fiber. Okay. And the Purkinje fiber that you see here innervate this. This is the papillary muscle. Okay. This is the papillary muscle. And when the papillary muscle contracts, it's pulled onto the chordae tendineae. And this will hold the cusp in place. And so even though that the ventricle started to pressurize, by pressurizing mean increases the pressure, right? The pressure, the increase in the pressure in the ventricle doesn't blow this backward. If it is, then you're going to get a mitral valve, or on this side mitral valve, or a tricuspid valve. I mean, blow upward. You tend to see more mitral valve prolapse than a tricuspid valve prolapse. Okay. Prolapse due to just a general term, vulvular. They just use the term insufficiency. That means it's not adequate. Then you can get a mitral valve prolapse. And that is also very common in this rheumatic fever. Okay? Rheumatic fever is an autoimmune disease. So when you have a strep infection, for example, you know, strep throat infection, so the antibody that produces to the Streptococcus pneumoniae, for example, that same antibody is attacking the mitral valve. So it's going to leave scarring. And scarring is not going to be sufficient. And so when the ventricle contracts, some of the blood can gush back. So instead of saying lub dub, you may say lub stub, lub stub, stub. You might hear that. If you want to listen to the bicuspid valve, the best place is to at the fifth intercostal left of the sternum. Mm-hmm. That's the best place to listen to it. And the best place to listen to the pulmonary abdominal valve come over, right, is at the second intercostal left of the sternum. This will be the fifth intercostal. Okay, so cardiac myocyte fiber, as you can see here, is twisted, right? And so what it means, not only when it contract like this, but it's twisted like this. Okay, almost like you're rinsing a towel of the water. If you get a wet towel, you want it to rinse of water, you kind of twist it, right, like that. And so to get all the water out. Alrighty. Okay. So 20-minute, talk about the EKG. Okay. Now, in the typical EKG, what you do is, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, is that you have a guy, this is his left arm, this is his right, no, sorry, this is his right arm, this is his left arm. This is his right leg, and this is his left leg. Okay. Electrocardiogram is measuring the changes in the conduction, the electricity that is moving through the body. It's known as the EKG, same thing as ECG, but EKG. And what I attempt to do is that there are 3 bipolar leads. Okay, bipolar meaning that the contraction is actually measuring the differences in this way as well as that way. That's what bipolar lead is. Whereas unipolar, and there's 9 of them, unipolar lead, it only sees the electrical changes around the heart outward. There's 9 of them. We don't care about that one too much. Right? What you do care is that there are 3 bipolar lead. Lead number 1, okay, is to measure the, so okay, lead number 1, lead number 2, and lead number 3. Now, lead number 1 is to measure the difference here between the right arm and the left arm. Right, so it's the right arm to the left arm. And lead number 2 is the right arm and the left leg. So it's the right arm to the left leg. And lead number 3 is between the left arm and the left leg. Okay? So the easy way to remember this is, okay, lead number 1, count how many L's. In this case, it's 1 L. Lead number 2, 2 L's. Lead number 3, 3 L's, left arms and left leg. Okay? So you get this triangle of Ivanhoff. You see this? This is a triangle of Ivanhoff. And what you see is that there is a summations of all this. So what you see is that in the EKG, this is the summation that you often see. Okay? And I'm going to use as the blank screen. Okay, so in the EKG, typically the EKG is set to run at a 25 millimeter per second. Okay, so in other words, if you have a needle and you're going to, let's say this is time 0, and it's going to run, okay, run. Now run, this is distant Y, run. Let's say right here, okay? From here to here, time Y is 1 second, but distant Y on a sheet of paper will be 25 millimeter. Anyone have a problem with that? Okay, now what you can also do is that it's even divided so that okay, so you see here is that often it's shown in box. So that's 1 box, that's 2 box, that's the 3rd box, that's your 4th box, and your 5th box, right? So from here to here, distant Y is 25 millimeter. What is distant Y from here to here? You guys ready to go home? Is that it? From here to here is 25 millimeter. and you divide into 5 equal boxes, what is the distance from here to here? How many millimeter? 125? 5 millimeter. Right? 5. Good. And then, of course, 5, 5, 5. Or, let me ask you, how long does it take from here to here? Time-wise. Time-wise. How long? Time-wise. 0.2? Yeah. Okay, 0.2. Very good. 0.2 second. Right? 0.2, 0.2, 0.2. Okay. So that's your, so then here you say, okay, that's 1 millimeter, that's 2 millimeter, that's 3 millimeter, that's 4 millimeter, that's 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, that's good because this is the take-home message. Each of the box that you see that has 5 millimeter is about 0.2 second. That's good. That's good to know. Okay. Now, oftentimes is that the EKG is set to run 25 millimeters per second, but if the electrical impulse move toward a positive charge, the machine is going to see it goes up, and if it goes away from the positive charge, it's going to goes down. Okay, so even in the triangle of Ivanhoff that you see here, you're going to see a summation that I'm just going to clear this. All right, you're going to see is that and so forth. Okay, this right here is known as the P wave. This right here is the QRS. And this, we got this, that's the T wave. So it's correspondingly that when the atrial depolarize, right, you see the P wave. So the P wave is often seen is atrial depolarization. So this wave that starts from the SA node that goes down is going to see this atrial depolarization. Then the QRS is the ventricle depolarization. Ventricle or ventricular depolarization. And then you have the T wave is ventricular repolarization. Okay. Now, where is the atrial repolarization? You have atrial depolarization, which is the P wave. You get the QRS, which is the ventricle depolarization, and you have the T wave, which is the ventricle repolarization. Where is the atrial repolarization? Turns out that when the ventricle depolarize, the ventricle repolarize. So it occurs at the same time, but it's masked. You can't see it. So we call this as the atrial repolarization. Okay. So all the events you can say from here to here, okay, from P to P, P wave to P wave, this is one cardiac cycle. Right? Now, what you do is you look from P to P, and let's say that there are, from here to here, there are 4 boxes. 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is P to P, 4 boxes. How long is one cardiac cycle? No. Remember, how long is this box? We say each box is about 0.2 second, right? Good. So it's 0.8 second. Now you know 0.8 second, how fast is the heart rate? Heart rate is 75 beats per minute. Okay. Now let's say, for example, here's a P wave, you see here. Now the guys all of a sudden they get a shot of epinephrine, right? And so now his P wave looks like this, then QRS and T wave, right? And then you can see here's another P wave. Here's a P wave. And then from this P wave to this P wave is 3 boxes. How long is one cardiac cycle? If there's 3 boxes, how long is one cardiac cycle? 0.6 second. Very good, right? How fast is the heart rate then? 0.6 second is 100 beats per minute. I don't know, this is kind of hard for a lot of people, but you know, just reason it out. Let's say, okay, it's 1B is equal to 0.6 second, right? Because you know it's 3 boxes. And I want to determine how many beats are there in 60 seconds, right? Just cross the multiply. So we say 60 second beat divided by 0.6. Move the decimal places 1, move the decimal place 1. So that's 600 divided by 6, or 100 beat per minute. There you go, nice and easy. All right. So maybe I'm going to give you an EKG, and you have to determine for me how fast is the heart rate. Okay. All right. So now we know what P wave, QRS, and T wave is implied. So again, those are only see as a summations of all the events that occur within this triangle. Okay. All right, so we call the P wave is the atrial depolarization, QRS ventricle depolarization, T wave is ventricle repolarization, right? So P, QRS, T, you guys need to know that. Now, here it just shows you trying to diagram mechanistically and see. The yellow here is a depolarization, right? Depolarization at the SA node first, and it sends out the wave from the right atrium to the right ventricle. You see that? And you can see that the EKG started to come up, right? Come up. And when it's fully repolarized, you see this P wave, right? Fully repolarizes this P wave. So it's going away. This is when it goes up, and this is when it goes away. So you get that P wave, right? Then there's a delay, if you want, you call PQ interval, because this is QRS, this is a PQ interval here. So what happened in the PQ interval? Think about this, right? For the next time we're going to discuss. The PQ interval must be occurring within this, right? At the junctional fiber, or probably at the bundles of His. So if you have, damaged bundles of His, you may have prolonged PQ interval, for example. Okay, so PQ interval. So the signal, we know that it goes to the junctional fiber, to the AV bundles, to the bundle of His and then Purkinje fiber. The ventricle depolarized at the apex first is depolarized by this yellow, indicate by the QRS, right? And then it fully depolarized, QRS interval is complete, and then the ventricle now start to go into green mode, which is the repolarization, and then indicated by this T. As you can see here is that when the ventricle depolarized, the atrial repolarized, this thing here, it's also occurred here, but you can't see. Note this, that one box that you see here is 200 millisecond or 0.7. Now, let's look at this one. How fast do you think this guy's heart rate is? And that this right here is about, each of the boxes is 0.2 seconds. You can look at P to P, or you can look at R to R. Nice peak, the highest peak is R to R. Okay. So how long, first of all, in this EKG, right, how long is one cardiac cycle? How long is one cardiac cycle? Anybody know? How many boxes, roughly? It's a little more than one box, two box. I would say more like 3 boxes than 2. 3 boxes, yes. So how long is one cardiac cycle? 3 boxes. Good, 0.6 seconds. How fast is the heart rate? Good, 100 beats per minute. That's it. All right, I'm going to stop here. That's 100 beats per minute. Does anyone have a question? I'm going to stop the recording here.